You've seen his face in countless war films, westerns, and gritty dramas, the strong jaw, the intense eyes, the man who never stole the spotlight but always made the story feel real. Richard Jaeckel was the definition of a true working actor, the kind of Hollywood soul who gave everything to his craft, yet rarely got the recognition he deserved. For 5 decades, he was the unsung hero of American cinema, a tough-as-nails soldier on screen and a humble professional off it. And then, something quietly tragic happened. He didn't fall to scandal or fade into disgrace. No, Richard Jaeckel's story is far more haunting. It's about a man who gave Hollywood everything, and in the end, Hollywood forgot him. He didn't disappear with scandal. He simply faded into silence, into shadows, into a memory most forgot. But his story? It deserves to be remembered. This is the story of a forgotten hero, a man whose final years will shake you to your core. The unexpected beginning. Richard Hanley Jaeckel never set out to become a movie star. Born on October 10, 1926 in Long Beach, New York, his life was shaped by hardship from the very beginning. During the crushing grip of the Great Depression, his family relocated to Los Angeles, not in search of fame, but of survival. While many in Hollywood were chasing dreams, young Richard was just trying to earn an honest living. His father toiled to keep food on the table, and Richard learned early what it meant to work hard and expect nothing. He wasn't groomed for stardom, he stumbled into it by pure chance. At just 17 years old, in 1943, Richard was working as a mail boy at 20th Century Fox. No spotlight. No stage name. Just a teenager in a uniform delivering studio memos. But fate had other plans. And that moment, as quiet and unremarkable as it seemed, would be the beginning of a journey no one, not even Richard, could have imagined. He wasn't chasing fame. He was just a teenager delivering letters and packages around the studio lot, hoping to earn a little cash. No acting lessons. No agent. No industry connections. But fate doesn't care about resumes. It cares about presence, and Richard Jaeckel had it. One afternoon, as he crossed the studio grounds like any other day, a casting director spotted him. There was something raw in his demeanor, a quiet grit, a toughness that couldn't be faked or taught. In a town full of polished hopefuls and rehearsed charm, Jaeckel looked real. Authentic. The kind of face that told a story before he ever opened his mouth. Approaching an unknown mailboy was unheard of back then, most actors clawed their way in through schools or agencies. But something about Jaeckel broke the rules. And just like that, Hollywood took notice. Almost overnight, he was cast in Guadalcanal Diary, a gripping World War II film. His role was small, a young Marine thrown into the chaos of war, but his performance hit a nerve. It wasn't about technique. It wasn't about polish. It was about truth. And Richard Jaeckel delivered it with haunting realism. It was something much rarer, complete believability. When people watched him on screen, they didn't see an actor playing a soldier, they saw a real person going through real fear, real courage, and real brotherhood. The late 1940s and early 1950s were very important for Jaeckel's career. He had become famous from Guadalcanal Diary, but he still had to prove he could play different types of roles. Many actors who found early success in military films ended up being stuck playing soldiers forever. Jaeckel was smart enough to see this trap and worked hard to avoid it. Whenever he could, even if they paid less or had smaller parts, he would act in crime dramas, westerns, comedies, and other genres to show how versatile he was. This took time and money, but it paid off in the end. During this time, Jaeckel also developed a way of playing characters that would serve him for the rest of his career. He thought that every character, no matter how small, had a full life story, so before filming, he would write detailed. He researched the backgrounds of his characters, even if most of that information never showed on screen. This preparation showed in his performances, giving even small parts depth and realism. The Korean War gave Jaeckel new opportunities. Hollywood was making a lot of war movies at the time, and his reputation for realistic military performances made him a sought-after actor. But he didn't just want to repeat his earlier successes, he read military histories and talked to real veterans to make each soldier character unique. Work with taught him some of the most important things he learned in his early career. Veteran actors taught him how to be professional. He learned that being on time, knowing your lines, and treating everyone with respect weren't just nice things to do, they were necessary for survival in Hollywood. He made these habits second nature, which helped him become known as one of the most reliable actors in the business. In the beginning, when character actors didn't make star salaries, Jaeckel had to work a lot to support himself. He took on roles that weren't always ideal, but he did even routine work with professionalism because he knew that every job was a chance to get better at what he did and build relationships that could lead to better opportunities in the future. Early career struggles and breakthroughs. Richard Jaeckel's career peaked in the 1950s and 1960s, though he would continue to work for decades afterward. During this time, he became one of Hollywood's most versatile and reliable actors, and moviegoers became familiar with his face. People all over the world, even if they didn't always know his name. This was the time when Jaeckel proved he was more than just another tough guy actor. One of his most famous roles was as Charlie Prince, a dangerous outlaw loyal to Glenn Ford in the 1957 classic 310 to Yuma. Jaeckel had roles in other classic westerns and war movies like Sands of Yuma, The Gunfighter, 310 to Yuma, and The Dirty Dozen. His performance in the movie showed how he could give a one-dimensional bad guy like Charlie Prince more depth. Was scary and unpredictable, but Jaeckel gave him a twisted sense of loyalty and even some funny moments out of the blue. Working in westerns was different for Jaeckel than working in war films. He had to learn new skills like horseback riding, using period weapons, and understanding the rules of the Old West. Jaeckel spent a lot of time on ranches and with real cowboys to learn these skills. This commitment to authenticity became his trademark. The Dirty Dozen, released in the late 1960s, was his biggest commercial success. The movie came out in 1967 and starred major stars like Lee Marvin, Charles Bronson, and Jim Brown, but Jaeckel more than held his own. He played Sergeant Clyde Boren, a military trainer whose job it was to prepare condemned prisoners for a dangerous mission behind enemy lines. The Dirty Dozen was important for Jaeckel's career in a number of ways. First, it was a huge commercial success that introduced him to audiences around the world. Second, it showed that he could work well in a. Third, it showed that he could play military roles with authority and credibility, which would be a big part of his later career. What made Jaeckel's performance in The Dirty Dozen so good was his ability to show both authority and vulnerability. Boren was tough enough to deal with dangerous criminals but smart enough to be nervous about the mission ahead. Jaeckel gave the role a lived-in quality that made people believe this. Wasn't just an actor in uniform, but a real fighter. The movie was a huge hit. And reviewers and audiences alike gave Jaeckel's performance high marks. Jaeckel's best performance may have been in 1971's Sometimes a Great Ideation, which was based on Ken Kesey's novel about an Oregon logging family. He played Joe Ben Stamper, a simple but kind cousin who gets stuck underwater during a logging accident. His performance was both heartbreaking and inspiring, showing a man facing death with grace and even humor. Notion showed how versatile Jaeckel is as an actor. Joe Ben could have been played as simple-minded support or comic relief, but Jaeckel found the humanity in the character. He showed Joe Ben's true faith, his love for his family, and his childlike wonder at the world around him. When tragedy strikes, Jaeckel's performance is deeply moving without ever becoming sentimental. To prepare for the role, Jaeckel spent time with real loggers in Oregon, learning about their dangerous jobs and close-knit communities. He knew that Joe Ben wasn't supposed to be stupid, but rather someone with a different kind of intelligence, emotional and spiritual rather than intellectual. This understanding made his performance both real and touching. The Academy Award nomination was well-deserved recognition for an actor who had been doing great work for almost 30 years. Unfortunately, he lost to Ben Johnson for The Last Picture Show, but the nomination itself was a career highlight for character actors. At that time, Oscar nominations were rare and precious, showing that their work had real value. During this time, Jaeckel also became more and more popular. He was active on TV and knew that it was becoming an important medium for actors, so he approached TV roles with the same professionalism he brought to movies. Shows like Gunsmoke, Bonanza, and The Fugitive had memorable guest roles with him that showed how versatile he was. TV work also gave him a steady income between movie roles. The pay wasn't as good as movies, but it gave him more work and the chance to play different types of characters, which Jaeckel liked. Variety. He used TV roles to show off parts of his talent that didn't always work in movies. What's impressive about Jaeckel's career during this time is how consistent he was. While many actors' careers went up and down, Jaeckel consistently produced high-quality work. Personal life and family values. Throughout his successful career, Richard Jaeckel kept a stable personal life that served as a stabilizing force in the often chaotic world of Hollywood. In 1947, he married Antoinette Marches, and the couple would go on to have 50 children. In Hollywood, where divorces and scandals were common, this kind of long-term relationship was rare. Antoinette was more than just Jaeckel's supportive spouse, she was also his partner in navigating the entertainment industry. She understood the demands of his career, the uncertainty of acting work, and the need to keep perspective in a business that could easily distort someone's sense of reality. Her practical nature complemented his work ethic perfectly. The couple had 2 children, and Jaeckel was determined to be a present father despite his busy career. He turned down roles that would keep him away from home for long periods of time, especially when his kids were young. This choice may have cost him some opportunities, but it showed what was most important to him. Jaeckel's parenting style was shaped by his own childhood during the Great Depression. He wanted his kids to know how important it was to work hard and stay grounded, even though their dad was famous in Hollywood. He taught them that fame was temporary and that character was more important than fame. The family lived simply compared to many others. Jaeckel Hollywood families didn't believe in showing off their money in a big way. Jaeckel liked to save money for his kids' education and safety. This practical approach to money would help him when he later had health problems. As a father, Jaeckel was known for being patient and gentle. Co-workers who went to his house were often surprised by how different he seemed from the tough guy he played on screen. With his family, he was warm, funny, and completely devoted. This difference showed how good an actor he was. He could play tough guys convincingly while being a gentle family man at home. He had many long-lasting friendships in the industry and was known for remembering people's birthdays, checking in on co-workers who were having a hard time, and celebrating other successes without being envious. These traits made him very popular with both cast and crew. His membership in industry groups showed his support for his fellow actors. He joined the Screen Actors Guild and worked to improve working conditions and benefits for character actors. He knew that stars got most of the attention, but he didn't care about that. Working artists also needed to be protected and helped as Hollywood changed. As the 1970s turned into the 1980s, Richard Jaeckel had to deal with a Hollywood that was quickly changing. The studio system that had helped character actors like him was falling apart, and younger, flashier stars and blockbuster movies were taking its place. While Jaeckel kept working steadily, the types of roles he could get started to change to reflect the new priorities of the industry. The rise of special effects-driven movies meant that character roles were becoming less common. Action movies that put explosions over emotional truth were replacing the kinds of intimate character-driven dramas that had shown off Jaeckel's skills. For an actor whose biggest strength was making his character seem real, this was a big change that threatened everything he had built his career on. The new Hollywood was also becoming more focused on young people, and studios found that teens were willing to watch movies with lots of explosions. Movies were made to appeal to younger viewers more and more, often at the expense of older viewers who liked the nuanced performances that Jaeckel was known for. During this time, from 1991 to 1994, Jaeckel played Lieutenant Ben Edwards on the hit series Baywatch. This role introduced him to a whole new generation of viewers, though it was very different from the gritty war films and westerns he was known for. That made him famous. The show about hot young lifeguards in swimsuits was as far from the Dirty Dozen as you could get, but Jaeckel approached it with his usual professionalism. Working on Baywatch was tough for an actor of Jaeckel's age and experience. The plots were simple compared to the complicated dramas he was used to, but he found ways to give his character depth and became a stabilizing presence on set, which is something many viewers didn't see. What they didn't know was that by the time he was on Baywatch, Jaeckel was already in his 60s and had been working in Hollywood for almost 50 years, while the younger cast members were just starting out. He was a veteran who had worked with some of the biggest names in movie history, but he never acted like he was better than the material or too good for TV work. He knew that the industry had changed, and he adapted behind the scenes, but the constant change was wearing him down. Friends and co-workers could tell. There were signs that Jaeckel was tired that were not like normal tiredness. The constant pace of TV production and the physical demands of many of his roles were wearing him down. He had spent decades doing his own stunts and doing whatever was needed to make scenes look real, and his body was starting to show the results. The financial realities of character acting also became more clear during this time. While leading men made millions of dollars per film, character actors like Jaeckel made small salaries and had to work hard to maintain their lifestyle. There were no huge payouts or deals to share in the profits for. Supporting roles were the only jobs that paid well, so even an actor with Jaeckel's long list of credits couldn't choose which roles to take. People in the industry started to notice changes in Jaeckel's behavior that pointed to deeper problems. He sometimes seemed confused during filming and forgot lines that he had learned easily in the past. He also seemed to be losing weight at first. These changes were subtle. Some of the changes he went through could have been due to normal aging or the stress of constant work, but those who knew him well were worried. The entertainment industry in the 1990s was also becoming more corporate than ever. The personal relationships that used to define Hollywood were being replaced by business decisions made by executives who often didn't know the actors personally. This meant that veteran performers like Jaeckel lost some of the protection and loyalty they had once enjoyed. Jaeckel approached each role with the same level of dedication that had been the norm for his whole career. He never publicly complained about how the industry was changing or seemed angry that younger actors were getting roles that used to go to older actors. His professionalism stayed the same even as his options narrowed. As the mid-1990s approached, Jaeckel's friends and co-workers began to think that something more serious than career problems was affecting their friend and colleague. Richard Jaeckel's family and friends got the worst news when he was diagnosed with terminal cancer in 1994. The disease had been growing quietly while he kept working, which is why his weight loss, fatigue, and confusion had worried those around him. For a man whose whole identity was built on strength, dependability, and helping others tell their stories, the diagnosis was not just a medical crisis, it was an existential challenge. The type of cancer Jaeckel had was aggressive and had already spread by the time it was found. Doctors gave him a short amount of time to live, and treatments back then were not nearly as advanced as they are now. Suddenly, the actor who had spent 50 years playing characters with impossible odds was in the most difficult role of his life, a real person fighting a battle he couldn't win through determination alone. The news hit his family like a ton of bricks, and Antoinette, who had been his partner for 50 years, had to take care of him. Their children, who were now adults with their own families, found it hard to accept that their strong, reliable father was dealing with something that he couldn't get through willpower and hard work. What made the diagnosis even worse was that it came at such a bad time. Jaeckel had been looking forward to spending more time with his family and maybe taking on more meaningful roles as he entered what should have been a comfortable retirement. He had plans to travel with Antoinette to spend more time with his grandchildren and maybe write about his experiences in Hollywood. All of these dreams seemed impossible all of a sudden. The diagnosis had immediate and devastating financial effects. Cancer treatment was expensive, and even though Jaeckel had worked steadily for decades, character actors in his time didn't make enough money to pay for long-term medical care. The residual payments from his many movies helped, but they weren't nearly enough to cover the mounting medical bills. For the first time in his adult life, Jaeckel found himself in a financial bind. There was a lot of uncertainty about health care in the 1990s. Today there are a lot of treatments, especially for dangerous illnesses like cancer. Were thought to be experimental and weren't covered, the family found. being in a place where they have to make medical decisions based. Even harder was the fact that Jaeckel could no longer work. Acting had been more than just his job, it was his passion, his identity, and his way of connecting with the world. The sets where he had spent most of his adult life were now off limits to him, and the co-workers who had helped him grow as an actor were no longer able to work with him. People he considered family were moving forward with their careers while he had to step aside. The silence that came after working full-time may have been the hardest adjustment of all. Jaeckel had always been private, but his illness made him even more so. He didn't want people to see him weak or struggling. The man who had always been someone others could depend on found it very hard to accept help from others. His pride, which had been one of his greatest strengths in his career, now got in the way of him getting the help he needed as word of his illness spread. The condition quietly spread through Hollywood, and the response showed both the best and worst sides of the entertainment industry. Some co-workers and friends rallied around Jaeckel and his family, offering both emotional and financial support. These were often people who had worked with him decades before but still remembered how kind and professional he was. Their loyalty showed how much many people really cared about him, but the response from the industry as a whole was disappointingly muted. There were no big charity events with lots of famous people, and studio executives didn't make big public displays of support. The industry that had benefited from Jaeckel's work for 50 years seemed to see his illness as a private matter that didn't need an institutional response. This silence said a lot about how Hollywood treated its veteran character actors when they couldn't contribute to current projects. The Motion Picture and Television Fund was an industry charity that helped care for entertainment workers. In Need became Jaeckel's lifeline during this time. The organization was created to help Hollywood veterans like him who had given up their careers but didn't have the resources they needed when they needed them the most. For Jaeckel, accepting this help was both a blessing and a painful reminder of how unstable even a successful career could be. The fund's facility in Woodland Hills became his home during his last years, and while it provided great medical care and support, it was a painful reminder of how far he had fallen from his days as an actor who used to be respected on movie sets was now living off of charity. Friends who went to see Jaeckel during this time were amazed by how well he handled stress and sadness. Even though he knew he was going to die soon and saw his family struggle with mounting medical bills, he never showed anger or self-pity. The same qualities that made him such a good actor kept him going during the worst time of his life: his dignity, his strength, and his care for others. The silent goodbye on June. On April 14, 1997, Richard Jaeckel died at the age of 70, surrounded by his family at the Motion Picture and Television Fund facility in Woodland Hills, California. His death marked the end of an era in Hollywood, though few people in the business seemed to realize it at the time. The man who had been in over 70 movies and countless TV shows died with the same quiet dignity that had been a hallmark of his entire career. The days following Jaeckel's death showed how much the entertainment business had changed. Since Jaeckel's early days in the golden age of Hollywood, his death would have been greeted with tributes, retrospective screenings, and extensive media coverage. Instead, his death was reported in trade magazines and briefly in some newspapers, but it didn't get the long-lasting attention that his contributions deserved. This lack of attention wasn't necessarily a sign of malice or disrespect. Instead, it showed how the fast-paced nature of modern entertainment had created a culture where today's news stories were more important than yesterday's stars. The news cycle, which used to spend days remembering a veteran actor, now moved on to other stories within hours for an actor whose biggest strength had been consistency rather than behavior that made headlines. This new reality was especially harsh. Family members and a small group of industry colleagues who had worked with Jaeckel over the years attended his funeral. These events gave those who knew him personally a chance to share memories and pay their respects. They paid their respects, but they weren't public, which could have taught younger generations about his contributions to American cinema. The stories told at these small gatherings painted a picture of a man who had stayed humble and kind throughout his career, never letting success change who he was. Among the attendees were actors from different times in his career, veterans from his early war films, and co-workers from his TV work, making it a unique event that showed how long and wide his career was. Each group had different memories of Jaeckel, but they all agreed on how professional and kind he was in the weeks after he died. Some film critics and enterprise historians began to write more considerate portions about Jaeckel's profession and its importance. Those articles highlighted his versatility, his professionalism, and his capacity to elevate each undertaking he touched. They pointed out that while he might also in no way have been a leading guy, he were an important aspect of dozens of movies that had been now considered classics without actors like Jaeckel. These films could have lacked the genuine texture that made them memorable. The timing of Jaeckel's demise additionally coincided with broader adjustments in how human beings fed on entertainment. The upward thrust of home video and cable television became making it easier for audiences to discover older films, which meant that Jaeckel's paintings was certainly becoming extra handy to new generations, whilst the enterprise that created it became forgetting his contributions. Visitors watching The Dirty Dozen or once in a while A Incredible Belief on TV ought to appreciate his performances without understanding something about his non-public struggles or the occasions of his death. His peak film profession years from 1967 to 1975 endured to locate audiences long after his loss of life, ensuring that his legacy would live on. Although the industry had moved on, movies like The Grimy Dozen, The Devil's Brigade, Chisholm, every so often a tremendous notion, and Ulana's Raid remained famous with audiences who preferred classic film and real performances. The monetary situation that Jaeckel's family confronted after his death highlighted one of the harsh realities of person appearing in Hollywood. Despite his substantial resume and many years of consistent work, there was no enormous estate to settle or fortune to inherit. The medical payments from his final illness had fed on tons of what savings he had gathered, and the residual payments from his movies, even as beneficial, have been now not big enough to provide long-time period security for his survivors. This monetary reality served as a sobering reminder that even successful careers in Hollywood might be precarious. The studio device that had once provided more comprehensive aid for veteran performers had largely disappeared, changed through an extra fragmented industry in which person actors were answerable for their personal economic making plans and safety for person actors like Jaeckel, who frequently worked project to challenge without the massive paydays that leading guys loved. This shift created sizable vulnerabilities. Antoinette Jaeckel faced the undertaking of rebuilding her lifestyles after 50 years of marriage. The leisure industry provided little ongoing help for the widows of person actors regardless of their husbands' contributions to limitless successful films. She discovered herself relying on the kindness of friends and the limited advantages to be had through enterprise groups. As 1997 came to an cease, Richard Jaeckel's death had already diminished from public reminiscence, even though his paintings endured to entertain audiences around the arena. The disconnect between his inventive legacy and his public recognition could come to be a recurring theme in discussions about how Hollywood treats its veteran performers, putting the stage for broader conversations about loyalty, reputation, and the proper value of amusement enterprise success. Richard Jaeckel's story is not considered one of scandal or failure. It is something far greater, heartbreaking, the story of a devoted craftsman who gave everything to his art, handiest to be quietly forgotten when he wished help most. His demise revealed uncomfortable truths, approximately Hollywood's remedy of character actors and the delicate nature of industry loyalty. Recall to hit the subscribe button. Thanks.